Okay, in this video, I'm going to be presenting a project that I just did for class, but it's kind of interesting, so I figured I'd present it, and it's also good practice for me to present it because I'm going to have to present it in front of class. So what I did was the net spend and salary distribution effects on wins in Major League Baseball. So what does that really mean? Well, it's how does the total payroll and its distribution among the individual players affect the number of wins for Major League Baseball franchises? And the data I had was from 1985 to 2015. So first thing I did was remove the outliers, which I considered any team that had less than 25 players, just because 25-man roster. So if there was less than that, then the team maybe didn't exist or something weird happened. There were a couple of them, so I just got rid of it. And then I merged together the two data sets I had, which were the team win percentages and the team salaries. So here's the raw salary data compared with win percentage, and it looks pretty crazy. There is a slight upward trend, but it's hard to tell just by looking at the data. So I looked at the total distribution, or the distribution of the total salaries, and you can see here that it's really skewed to the right. So I'm going to log this, and then when you log it and compare it with the win percentage, it looks a little bit better, but still pretty random. So why is this? Well, I need to add scaling factors because every year in Major League Baseball, the average salary was different. So if we're comparing from 1985 to 2003 here, you can see that in 1985, we have to multiply their salaries by 4.86. And just to get to the same, and to make that the same as 2003, we'd also have to multiply 2003 by 0.849. So 2003 salaries are getting smaller, 1985 salaries are getting way bigger, just to even them all out and make all the salaries for every year the same. Now, when we apply this to the team salaries, you just multiply the scaling factor for the given year by the total salary, and you get a new total salary scaled. And that's what we're going to be using from now on. And I was wondering if I should log the total scaled salary, and it's less obvious because it is more uniform, but it still is skewed right with some big outliers, so I am going to log it. And now we're getting something that looks like it could be convincing. We're seeing the adjusted log total salary versus the win percentage, and you can see a clear trend. So now I'm going to be working on the salary distribution aspect, and I just add a little player percent variable that is the percentage of the team's salary for that year that player is taking up. And then when you sort the data, you can just take the top one from each team, top 5, top 10, sum those up. You get the salary distribution numbers. So our updated data set looks like this. We have the year, the team ID, the salary distribution 1, 2, 1, 5, 10, the win percentage, and the scaled salary. So the percentage of total payroll spent on the team's top player versus their win percentage. Now here you can see a downward trend, and the teams that are really winning a lot of games here, 70% of their games, they're spending between 10 and 15, some even less than 10% on their best player. And now when we look at top 5 players, it's still a downward trend, but less obvious. And then 10 players is almost just flat. This seems to not really tell us much. So the regressions I chose to look at were the win percentage versus total payroll, and then adding in each of the salary distributions, and then one that just had them all. So the win percentage versus just payroll. The intercept of the regression was negative 0.667, which means that if a team's total salary were 0, the predicted wins would be, or the predicted win percentage would be negative 0.667. But obviously, the salary is never going to be 0, so this intercept value is not going to be meaningful to us, at least on its own. The coefficient of the total payroll predictor is 0.0654, which means for every 1 unit increase in the log of the team's salary, you got to remember that for the regression, I'm using log. The predicted win predicted win percentage increases by 0.0654, and the p-value is really, really low. So this is definitely, we can be very confident that this is statistically significant. However, the R squared value is only 0.1255, which means that this is only explaining 12.5% of the variation in win percentage. So there's probably some other important factors that we don't have included here. Next, we're going to be adding in the salary distribution of the top player to the model. And again, we still don't really care about the intercept because on its own, it's not going to tell us anything. But and the total salary predictor, it's changed slightly to take into account the salary distribution, but its p-value is still extremely low and is statistically significant. Looking at the coefficient for the salary distribution of the top player, we see that it is negative, and this means, and the value means that, so if a team paid their top player 0%, which obviously isn't possible, but if one team were able to do that and another team paid 100% of their salary to the top player, the team that paid 100% of the salary to the top player, their win percentage would be lower by 0.1616 on average. And the p-value for this is less than 0.01, indicating that this is statistically significant. But the R-squared value is slightly higher. Well, slightly higher is still very low. And so there are important factors that are not included in this model. Now looking at the salary distribution of the top 5 players instead of just the top 1 player. The p-values for both of these predictors are less than 0.05. So they are significant, not as confident as the top player, but still confident, up to 95%. And the R-squared value is still small, suggesting, again, that there are important factors not in this model. Looking at 10, the distribution for the top 10, the p-value for this one is 0.12, which is not statistically significant at the 0.05 level, indicating that there is not enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis that the coefficient for salary distribution 10 is 0. So basically, we can't say that it's doing anything. Now looking when we add in all the salary distributions into the same model, we see that the coefficients for this salary and the total salary and the salary distribution are both statistically significant, but the coefficients for 5 and 10 are not statistically significant. So when I'm looking at this overall, the regression win percentage for total payroll with salary distribution 1 had the highest adjusted R-square. So that's going to be the one that's telling us the most about win percentage and is the most accurate model. And overall, these outputs suggest that there is a positive linear relationship between an MLB team's total salary and its win percentage, and that teams with a higher percentage of their total salary going to one player may have a lower predicted win percentage, holding the total salary constant. So basically, you don't want to be giving your top player a higher percentage of the money if you still have that same total salary. If you're just paying your top player less, then you're going to win less, unless your total salary remains constant. But these two predictors together only explain a small amount of the variation in win percentage, around 13.5. So how much does it cost to win? How much does one win cost? Well, I just multiplied the win percentage in my data by 162, which is how many games are in a regular MLB season. And we see here that the intercept was 69.53, meaning that if a team's salary is 0, which obviously won't happen, but some teams do get pretty close, then the team would win 69.53 games on average. And the coefficient for the salary scaled in this linear regression model was a very small number, 1.92 to the power of 10 to the negative 7, which means that when you take 1 divided by that, you get $5.25 million, and that's the predicted average cost of an additional win using the scaled dollars that were closest to the 1999 and 2000 seasons. But if we, for example, take the most recent season, 2015, has a scaling factor of 0.4999. If we divide that by the scaling factor, we can see that in 2015 dollars, it's actually $10.5 million for an additional win, assuming that a team with 0 payroll would win 69.53 games, which is obviously not true, but no teams have spent less than $10 million in a season, 10 million scaled dollars in a season. And those teams are pretty close to the 69 number. So yeah, one win, an additional win, assuming that you would get 69.5 wins with zero payroll. Each additional win would cost you, on average, $10.5 million. Thank you.